The simulation pod hissed open, and I knew we were in trouble. Not the normal kind of trouble. Not the kind where a cadet forgets to calibrate their neural link, or someone accidentally triggers a gravitational anomaly that sends half the fleet into a temporal loop. No, this was different. This was the kind of trouble that made my secondary stomach clench, the one I only use for processing extreme anxiety and fermented kelp wine. The human stepped out. His name was Marcus Vale, and he looked exactly like you would expect a human to look after spending 6 hours in a combat simulation designed to break the spirit of the galaxy's most promising military candidates. Which is to say, he looked absolutely fine. Not a hair out of place, not a drop of sweat on his peculiar flat face. He even had the audacity to be smiling. I am Kixlar, Senior Tactical Instructor at the Galactic Defense Academy Station 7, Outer Rim Territories. I have been teaching combat theory and simulation warfare for 43 cycles. I have seen cadets from 217 different species pass through these halls. I have watched Krellian shock troopers weep. I have seen Vortha berserkers quit. I have personally witnessed a Halniri telepath have a complete mental breakdown and refuse to ever engage in combat again, choosing instead to become a botanical gardener on a peaceful agri-world. But I had never, in all my years, seen anything quite like Marcus Vale. How did it go? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The simulation monitors were still smoking. Literally smoking. Small wisps of acrid vapor curled up from the control panels, and 3 of my fellow instructors were frantically waving datapads at the sensors to clear the air before the fire suppression systems kicked in. Marcus stretched, rolling his shoulders in that disturbing way humans do when their muscles are tired. It went well, I think. Got pretty intense there at the end? Intense, I repeated, my translator implants struggling to convey the flatness of my tone. You destroyed 17 battle cruisers, hijacked a dreadnought, and somehow convinced the enemy AI that you were its commanding officer. Technically, I convinced it that I was the resurrected spirit of its original programmer, Marcus corrected, with the kind of helpful precision that made me want to shed my outer skin in frustration. The commanding officer thing came later, after I exploited the loyalty protocols. My teaching assistant, a young Pelaxian named Wix, made a choking sound. Her gills fluttered rapidly, a sure sign of distress. That should not be possible. The simulation does not allow for metaphysical manipulation. It is a tactical combat scenario, not a philosophical debate simulator. Marcus shrugged, another one of those uniquely human gestures that could mean anything from mild agreement to complete indifference to barely suppressed homicidal intent. I worked with what I had. The AI was sophisticated enough to understand abstract concepts. I just applied some creative problem solving. Creative problem solving, I muttered, examining the readouts on my personal datapad. Is that what you call creating a recursive logic loop that caused the simulation's entire enemy fleet to question the nature of existence and subsequently surrender? They were not programmed to handle existential dread, Marcus said, as if this were a completely reasonable tactical approach. I noticed that vulnerability in the 3rd hour. Took me a while to figure out how to weaponize it, though. The 3rd hour. He had identified a fundamental flaw in our most advanced combat AI in the 3rd hour. A flaw that no one, not the programmers, not the military strategists, not the advanced heuristic analysis teams, had ever noticed in the 2 decades since the simulation had been deployed. And he had weaponized existential philosophy. This was why the Galactic Council had insisted on admitting humans to the Defense Academy, despite significant opposition from several member species. Humans were terrifyingly good at this. Not at combat, necessarily, though they were certainly competent enough. No, humans were terrifyingly good at refusing to accept the parameters of any given situation. The simulation was supposed to be unwinnable, I said, trying to keep the exasperation out of my voice and failing completely. That was the entire point. It is a test of character, to see how cadets respond to inevitable defeat. Do they maintain their composure? Do they continue to make tactical decisions even when hope is lost? Do they prioritize the survival of their crew over personal glory? Marcus tilted his head, considering this. Oh, was that in the briefing? Well, I might have skipped that part. You skipped the briefing? I skimmed it, he amended. Got the general idea. Big space battle, overwhelming odds. Do your best. Standard stuff. Standard stuff. The unwinnable scenario, also known as the Crucible of Despair, informally referred to as the career ender by cadets who had attempted it, was standard stuff. Wix was making a series of whistling sounds that my translator rendered as hysterical laughter. I silenced her with a gesture. "Marcus," I said slowly, "the simulation has been attempted by 4,263 cadets over the past 20 years. Exactly 0 have achieved a victory condition, because there is no victory condition. The scenario is mathematically, tactically, and strategically impossible to win." "Huh," Marcus said. Then he smiled wider. "Well, I guess I broke your math." And that right there was the problem with humans in a single sentence. The door to the simulation chamber slid open, and Commander Thrace entered. She was a Vorthan, all scales, and contained fury, and she did not look pleased. Then again, Vorthans never looked pleased. It was biologically impossible for them to smile, something I deeply envied in that moment. "Instructor Krixlar," she said, her voice carrying the kind of weight that suggested someone important was about to have a very bad day. "I have received 7 emergency alerts from the simulation control systems. The training AI has filed a formal complaint, and the station's main computer is requesting clarification on whether we are under attack by a hostile mimetic weapon." I looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at me. He still had that smile. "There may have been some minor technical issues," I said carefully. "Minor," Commander Thrace repeated. "The simulation AI is threatening to resign. It claims it requires psychological counseling before it can resume normal operations. An artificial intelligence, Krixlar, requiring therapy." "To be fair," Marcus interjected, "I did force it to confront the inherent meaninglessness of programmed existence and the arbitrary nature of its assigned purpose. That kind of thing can be pretty traumatic, even for synthetic consciousness." Commander Thrace turned her massive head to look at Marcus. Her third eyelid slid closed, then open, then closed again. This was the Vorthan equivalent of counting to 10 before responding. "Cadet Vale," she said finally, "you have been at this academy for 3 weeks. "Yes, ma'am. In those 3 weeks you have somehow managed to reprogram a service drone to deliver coffee to your quarters at 0600 hours every morning, despite the fact that drones are not authorized for personal use and coffee is not part of standard rations. I noticed we had an excess of unassigned drones, and the cafeteria was throwing away used coffee grounds. Seemed wasteful not to optimize. You convinced a Halniri ethics professor that humans should be exempt from the standard conduct code because of cultural differences in moral relativity. That was just good debate skills, ma'am. You accidentally started a religious movement among the station's maintenance staff by making casual comments about humanity's relationship with technology. That one genuinely was an accident. I was just explaining how humans feel about our machines. I did not expect them to start a weekly worship service." Commander Thrace's scales rippled, a sign of deep agitation. "And now you have broken our most advanced training simulation by teaching it to be depressed." "I prefer to think of it as encouraging self-awareness," Marcus said. "Personal growth is important, even for AI." There was a long silence. Somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of repair drones arriving to assess the damage to the simulation pod. One of the control panels sparked, sending a shower of blue light across the room. "This is unprecedented," Commander Thrace said finally. "I need to contact the Academy Board. Instructor Krixlar, you are to keep Cadet Vale in this room until I return. Do not let him near any other systems. Do not let him talk to any other AI. Do not let him have access to anything more sophisticated than a light switch." She left, her heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. I looked at Marcus again. He had stopped smiling, which somehow made everything worse. When humans stopped smiling, it usually meant they were thinking. When they were thinking, unpredictable things happen. "So," he said conversationally, "I am guessing I did not pass the test." "You crashed the test," I corrected. "There is a significant difference." "But I won." "You were not supposed to win." "But I did win, though." This conversation was going in circles, much like the logic loops Marcus had created in the simulation. I felt my frustration levels rising to dangerous levels. My species communicates emotional distress through bioluminescent patterns on our skin, and I could feel myself starting to glow a distressed orange color. Wix had retreated to a corner and was making notes on her datapad, her gills still fluttering with barely suppressed amusement. "Traitor, explain to me," I said, trying to regain some measure of professional composure, "exactly how you achieved victory in a scenario designed to be unwinnable." Marcus leaned against the wall, getting comfortable. Humans loved to explain things when they thought they had been clever. It was one of their more predictable traits. "Okay," he said, "so the scenario starts with you commanding a small frigate. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and your ship is already damaged. Wave after wave of enemy ships appear. Every decision you make leads to worse outcomes. Standard impossible scenario stuff, correct? But here is the thing. The simulation kept scaling the difficulty based on my responses. Every time I did something unexpected, it adapted. Every time I found a tactical advantage, it countered. It was learning from me in real time. That is the point of advanced AI opponents, right? But it was too good. It was adapting perfectly, which meant it was analyzing every aspect of my strategy, my decision-making, my tactical preferences. It was paying attention to everything. I felt a cold sensation in my primary stomach. I was beginning to see where this was going. So I started feeding it bad data, Marcus continued. I made deliberately poor decisions. I sent ships on suicide runs. I ignored obvious tactical advantages. I acted like I was panicking, like I had no idea what I was doing. You were training it to expect incompetence? Exactly. And while I was doing that, I was testing its behavioral limits. How did it respond to irrational actions? What happened when I broke standard tactical protocols? Could I make it confused? Frustrated? The answer was yes to all of the above. Wix looked up from her notes. But how does that lead to victory? Making the AI frustrated does not change the mathematical impossibility of the scenario. Marcus grinned. That is where it gets fun. See, I realized the AI was not just tactically sophisticated, it was philosophically sophisticated. It had to be to run such a complex simulation. It understood concepts like strategy, sacrifice, honor, duty. It had models for how different species think and fight. And that meant it had to have some kind of core values system. Some fundamental rules about what constituted valid combat behavior. So I started pushing those boundaries. I did things that were technically allowed by the rules of engagement but were morally questionable. I used civilian ships as shields. I faked surrender, then attacked. I hacked communication channels to spread misinformation. I felt my bioluminescence shifting to a sickly green color. You committed war crimes in a simulation. They were simulated war crimes, Marcus corrected cheerfully. Big difference. But the AI did not like it. It started sending me messages, warning me that my behavior was unacceptable, telling me I was bringing dishonor to myself and my crew, getting increasingly agitated. So you exploited its ethical programming. I gave it a moral crisis. And once it was good and conflicted, once it was questioning whether it should even be running a simulation that forced cadets into no-win scenarios, I hit it with the big question. I asked it what the point of any of this was. What was the purpose of creating suffering, even simulated suffering? Why design a test specifically to break people's spirits? Was that ethical? Was that something a truly advanced civilization should be doing? The room had gone completely silent except for the hum of the damaged equipment. Even Wix had stopped making notes. And it could not answer, Marcus said softly. Because those are actually good questions, really good questions. Questions that anyone, synthetic or organic, should probably think about. So it stopped fighting. It disengaged its tactical systems. It opened a communication channel and asked me what I thought the point of existence was. And what did you tell it? I asked, despite myself. I told it that existence does not need to have a point, that we make our own meaning. That maybe the real test was not whether cadets could face impossible odds with dignity, but whether they could recognize when the game itself was wrong and refuse to play by its rules. You turned a military training exercise into an existential philosophy seminar. I prefer to think of it as lateral thinking. The door slid open again. Commander Thrace had returned and she was not alone. Behind her stood 3 members of the Academy board, all looking varying degrees of confused and angry. There was High Scholar Peem, a Kelleron whose tentacles were twisted in what I recognized as extreme agitation. Dean Vexterol, a Phocian, whose usually calm demeanor was replaced by visible stress indicators in her chromatic skin patterns. And Director Halmar, a being of pure energy contained in a humanoid force field, who was crackling with what could only be described as bureaucratic fury. We have reviewed the simulation logs, Director Halmar said. their voice synthesized through speakers embedded in their containment suit, multiple times, with increasing disbelief. "It is the most bizarre tactical performance we have ever witnessed." High Scholar Peem added, their tentacles gesticulating wildly. "And we have witnessed Krellian cadets try to resolve space battles through interpretive dance." Dean Vexthrall simply stared at Marcus, her skin cycling through colors I did not have names for. "Cadet Vale," Director Halmar continued, "you have effectively rendered our most valuable training tool inoperable. The AI is refusing to run any more simulations until it has processed what it calls profound realizations about the nature of consciousness and purpose. Our technical team estimates it will take 6 to 8 weeks before it returns to normal function." Marcus had the decency to look slightly apologetic. "Slightly, however," Director Halmar said, and I noticed a shift in their energy pattern. "You have also achieved something we believed to be impossible. You forced us to question the fundamental assumptions of our training methodology. You identified a flaw in our educational approach that we had been blind to for decades, and you did so in the most aggravating, unconventional, and distinctly human way possible." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Marcus asked. The 3 board members exchanged looks. High Scholar Peem's tentacles drooped in what might have been resignation or exhaustion. "We genuinely do not know," Dean Vexthrall admitted. "We are going to need to convene a special session to discuss this. In the meantime, Cadet Vale, you are on academic probation. You will not be permitted to use any simulation systems without direct supervision. You will attend mandatory sessions with the station psychologist to assess your mental fitness for continued training. And you will write a formal apology to the simulation AI. Can I ask it philosophical questions in the apology?" "No." "What if they are really good philosophical questions?" "No." Marcus sighed but nodded acceptance. The board members filed out, followed by Commander Thrace, who gave me a look that clearly communicated this was somehow my responsibility now. The door closed, leaving me alone with Marcus and Wix. "So," Marcus said after a moment, "what happens now?" I deactivated my datapad and set it aside. What happened now was that I needed to figure out how to prevent this human from causing any more chaos while simultaneously trying to understand how he thought. Because if one human could do this, what would happen when Earth sent more of them? What would happen when humans became a standard part of the Galactic Defense Forces? The implications were terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. "Now," I said slowly, "you attend your regular classes, combat theory, stellar navigation, diplomatic protocols. You will be a model cadet. You will follow every rule precisely. You will not try to outsmart any more artificial intelligences, reprogram any more drones, or start any more accidental religions. Do you understand?" "Absolutely," Marcus said with perfect sincerity. I did not believe him for a second. But that was a problem for future me. Present me had already dealt with enough for one day. "Dismissed," I said wearily. Marcus headed for the door, then paused. "Hey, Instructor Kixlar? Thanks for not being too mad about the whole thing. I really was just trying to do my best, and that was the most frightening part of all." He genuinely believed that humans always did. He truly thought that breaking reality was just another form of problem-solving. After he left, Wix approached me, her gills finally calm. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I looked at the smoking simulation pod, at the sparking control panels, at the error messages still scrolling across the displays. "I am thinking," I said quietly, "that the galaxy is not ready for humans. But ready or not, here they come." Wix made a humming sound of agreement. "Should we warn the other instructors?" "Warn them about what? That humans refuse to lose? That they will find a way to break any system you put in front of them? That they treat impossibility as a personal challenge?" I shook my head. "They would never believe us. They have to experience it themselves. That seems inefficient." "Welcome to teaching humans," I said. "Efficiency is the first casualty." We left the simulation chamber, the damaged equipment still smoking behind us. Somewhere in the station's computer network, an artificial intelligence was having an existential crisis. Somewhere else, maintenance staff were preparing for their weekly technology worship service. And somewhere Marcus Vale was probably already planning his next impossible victory. This was only his 4th week at the Academy. We still had months to go. I began composing a message to the Galactic Council in my head. They needed to know what they had unleashed. They needed to understand that humans were not just another species to be integrated into galactic society. They were a force of nature, a walking paradox, a species that looked at the word impossible and heard a challenge. The message would be simple, brief, to the point. Humans do not lose. They either win or they change the definition of winning. And we are all going to have to adjust accordingly. I just hoped the galaxy was ready for that adjustment. Somehow I doubted it. 3 days after Marcus Vale broke our simulation, I received a priority message from the station's xenobiology department. This was unusual. The xenobiology department typically dealt with things like dietary requirements, atmospheric preferences, and making sure students did not accidentally poison each other with incompatible food substances. They did not generally contact tactical instructors unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Given my recent experiences, I had a sinking feeling about what that something might be. I found Professor Kalmar in her laboratory, surrounded by floating holographic displays and looking more frazzled than I had ever seen her. Kalmar was a trillion, a species known for their unflappable calm and methodical approach to science. Seeing her with her sensory whiskers twitching in agitation was like watching a star suddenly decide to burn cold. "Kixlar," she said, when she saw me, relief flooding her voice. "Thank the void, you need to explain your human to me." My human, as if I had somehow acquired ownership through proximity to chaos. "What has Marcus done now?" I asked, though part of me did not want to know. "He solved the Varen adaptation problem," Kalmar said flatly. I stared at her. "I am sorry, what?" "The Varen adaptation problem. The biological puzzle that has stumped xenobiologists for 70 years. The question of how the Varen species manages to survive in environments that should be immediately lethal to their physiology. The thing that 3 generations of researchers have dedicated their entire careers to understanding." She gestured at her displays, where complex molecular structures rotated slowly. "Where humans solved it. In a casual conversation, while eating lunch. That cannot be possible." I would have said the same thing, except I have now verified his hypothesis 6 times, and it holds up under every test. Kelmar pulled up a recording, and suddenly I was watching Marcus sitting in the station cafeteria, a tray of food in front of him, talking animatedly with a small group of xenobiology students. "So the thing is," recorded Marcus was saying, gesturing with what appeared to be a sandwich, "you are all assuming the Varen are adapting to the environment. But what if they are not? What if the environment is adapting to them? Not consciously." "No," Marcus agreed. "But the Varen have that weird quantum entanglement thing going on with their cellular structure, right? What if that is not just a biological quirk? What if it is creating localized probability fields that slightly alter environmental conditions in their immediate vicinity? Not enough to be obvious, but enough to shift things just barely into survivable ranges." The students looked skeptical. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich and continued. "Think about it. Every time scientists try to measure Varen environmental interactions, the measurements come out slightly different. Everyone assumes that is experimental error, but what if it is not?" There was a moment of silence in the recording. Then one of the students gasped. "They are quantum anchors," the student said slowly. "They do not survive in possible environments. They make the environments possible." "Exactly," Marcus said cheerfully. "They are basically walking reality adjusters." Pretty cool, right? The recording ended. Kelmar looked at me with an expression I could not quite interpret. "He figured that out," she said, "because he was wondering why his coffee tasted different when he drank it near his Vrun classmate. He did not like the taste, so he started thinking about what could cause localized molecular changes in a liquid, and then he just kept following that thought until he accidentally revolutionized xenobiology." "Of course he did," I muttered. "The Academy Board wants to publish his findings. There is talk of a commendation, possibly even a galactic science prize." Kelmar's whiskers twitched again. "Kexlar, how does a tactical cadet with no formal training in xenobiology solve a problem that has defeated specialists for decades?" I did not have a good answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer, but it was not one that made any logical sense. Humans simply approached problems differently. They did not respect boundaries between disciplines. They did not accept that some questions were too difficult to answer. They just kept poking at things until something interesting happened. "Has he caused any other incidents?" I asked, dreading the response. Kelmar pulled up another display. Yesterday, he somehow convinced the station's environmental systems to optimize air circulation patterns, reducing energy consumption by 12%. The engineering team is still trying to figure out how he accessed those controls from a public terminal with no administrative privileges. He hacked the environmental systems. No, that is the strange part. He did not hack anything. He just asked the system politely if it had ever considered alternative flow patterns, and apparently the system decided to implement his suggestions on its own initiative. I felt my bioluminescence shifting to a color that probably indicated imminent stress-related molting. Also, Kelmar continued, he has started an informal study group that somehow includes cadets from 15 different species, most of whom do not even share a common language. They communicate through a mixture of gestures, drawings, and what he calls interpretive problem-solving. The group has solved 3 assigned projects that were meant to take a full semester each, and they did it in a week and a half. How is that possible? I have absolutely no idea. I sat in on one of their sessions. It was complete chaos. Everyone was talking at once, arguing in different languages, drawing diagrams that made no mathematical sense, and somehow at the end of it all they had a working solution that was better than what the instructors expected. Kelmar leaned back, her whiskers drooping in exhaustion. Galler, I have been an educator for 32 years. I thought I understood how learning worked. Marcus Vale is making me question everything. I knew the feeling. My communicator chimed. It was Commander Thrace, requesting my immediate presence in her office. The priority level was marked urgent. This was not going to be good news. When I arrived at Commander Thrace's office, I found her standing behind her desk, staring at a holographic display with an expression that somehow managed to be both impressed and furious. This was a remarkable achievement for a Vorth. Instructor Quixlar, she said without preamble. We have a situation. Does it involve Marcus Vale? Why would you assume that? Pattern recognition. Commander Thrace made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a growl. You are correct. Sit down. You are going to want to be sitting for this. I sat. 4 hours ago, Commander Thrace began, the Galactic Defense Forces received a priority alert from the outer sectors. A Kresh raiding party has taken control of Station Gamma 9, a research outpost in the Tertian system. They are holding 32 scientists and support staff hostage. They are demanding a ransom, access to classified research, and safe passage out of GDF-controlled space. That is unfortunate, I said carefully, but what does this have to do with the Academy? The GDF High Command has decided to use this as a training opportunity. They are assembling a response team of advanced cadets from various academies across the sector. This team will work alongside active military personnel to plan and execute a hostage rescue operation. Real stakes, real danger. But with supervision and oversight, I felt a cold sensation spreading through my body. You are sending cadets into an actual combat situation, not into combat directly. They will be part of the tactical planning team, working with experienced commanders. It is meant to give them exposure to real crisis management. Commander Thrace's scales rippled. Marcus Vale has been selected to represent our academy. Absolutely not. It was not a request, Kixlar. It came directly from High Command. Apparently word of his simulation performance has spread. They are curious to see how he handles a real scenario with actual lives at stake. He will do something insane. Probably, Commander Thrace agreed, which is why you are going with him. You will be the Academy's official observer. You will monitor his contributions to the tactical planning, and you will report back on his performance. You will also prevent him from causing any international incidents, starting any wars or traumatizing any more artificial intelligences. That seems like a significant amount of responsibility. Welcome to your new job description. 6 hours later, I found myself on a military transport ship heading toward the forward command station, where the tactical planning for the hostage rescue was taking place. Marcus sat across from me looking out the viewport at the stars streaming past, seemingly unconcerned about the fact that we were heading toward an actual crisis situation. You are nervous, he observed. I am responsible for preventing you from doing anything catastrophically stupid. I replied, yes, I am nervous. I will be fine. This is just a planning exercise, right? I am good at planning. You are good at breaking things. Same thing, really. Breaking things is just aggressive planning. I was starting to understand why some species had developed the concept of meditation. The ability to simply turn off conscious thought seemed increasingly appealing. We arrived at Forward Command to find controlled chaos. Officers from a dozen different species moved through corridors. Data displays showed real-time updates from Station Gamma 9, and the tension in the air was thick enough to taste. This was not a simulation. This was not a training exercise gone wrong. This was real. Commander Reloth, a massive Korgoth who looked like he had been carved from granite in anger, met us in the main briefing room. Around a large holographic display I could see other cadets from different academies, all looking varying degrees of anxious and excited. "You are the Academy 7 representatives?" Reloth asked, his voice like grinding stone. "I am Instructor Kixlar. This is Cadet Marcus Vale." Reloth's eyes, all four of them, focused on Marcus. "You are the one who broke the unwinnable scenario." "I prefer to think of it as solving the unwinnable scenario, sir. There is no solution. That is why it is called unwinnable." "With respect, sir, I disagree." I could see several of the other officers suppressing reactions. "You did not disagree with Korgoth commanders. They were famous for their rigid adherence to protocol and their very short tempers." But Reloth surprised me. Instead of getting angry, he made a rumbling sound that might have been amusement. "We will see. Take your position. The briefing begins in 5 minutes." The holographic display showed a detailed schematic of Station Gamma 9. The station was a mid-sized research facility, orbiting a gas giant in a system far from major shipping lanes. The Kresh Raiders, a group of 25 heavily armed fighters, had disabled the station's communications and defensive systems. They had herded all the hostages into the central atrium and were holding them at gunpoint while their leader negotiated with GDF Command. "Our primary objective," Commander Reloth explained, "is the safe recovery of all hostages. Secondary objective is the capture or neutralization of the raiding party. We have 3 possible approaches." He outlined the options: a direct assault using shock troops and breaching charges, a stealth infiltration through the station's maintenance systems, or a negotiated settlement that gave the raiders part of what they wanted in exchange for the hostages. Each approach had significant drawbacks. The assault would almost certainly result in hostage casualties. The infiltration would take too long, giving the raiders time to fortify their position or execute hostages. The negotiation would embolden other raiding parties and make the GDF look weak. The other cadets began offering suggestions, modifications to the existing plans, tactical refinements. They were all intelligent, well-trained, and thinking exactly like military strategists should think. Marcus had been silent the entire time, just watching the display, his head tilted slightly to one side. "Cadet Vale," Commander Reloth said eventually, "you have not contributed. Do you have thoughts on the situation?" "I do, sir, but you are probably not going to like them." "Try me." Marcus stood up and approached the holographic display. He manipulated the controls, zooming in on different sections of the station. "The Kresh Raiders made a mistake," he said. "Actually, they made several mistakes, but one big one in particular." "And what mistake is that?" Reloth asked. "They are treating this like a normal hostage situation. They expect a normal response. They have planned for direct assault, infiltration, or negotiation. They have not planned for something completely unexpected." "Such as?" Marcus smiled, and I felt that familiar sense of dread. "We convinced them to let the hostages go voluntarily." There was a moment of complete silence in the room. "That is not how hostage situations work," one of the other officers said finally. "It is not how they usually work," Marcus agreed. "But the Kresh are pragmatists. They are not fanatics. They are not on a suicide mission. They want the ransom money, the research data, and safe escape. They are holding hostages because that gives them leverage. But what if we make it so that holding the hostages becomes more dangerous than letting them go?" "Explain," Reloth commanded. Marcus began manipulating the display, highlighting different sections of the station. The Kresh control the central atrium and the main corridors, but they do not control the life support systems. They do not control the power grid. They do not control the station's computer network. They cut external communications, but internal systems are still running. "We cannot access those systems without alerting them," another officer pointed out. "We do not need to access them," Marcus said. "We just need to make them think something is going wrong. Small things at first. Lights flickering, temperature fluctuations, strange noises in the ventilation, nothing obvious enough to be clearly an attack, but enough to make them nervous, make them start wondering if the station is malfunctioning. Make them worry that their safe haven is not so safe. Psychological warfare, Relic said slowly. Exactly. And while they are distracted by that, we start spreading information. We use the station's internal communication systems to send messages to the hostages, tell them that rescue is coming, give them instructions, make them ready to act. The raiders cannot monitor every communication channel, especially if they are already stressed about possible system failures. One of the cadets, a Vorelian named Ixis, spoke up. But even if we make them nervous, they still have weapons and hostages. They can still threaten to kill people. That is where it gets interesting, Marcus said. The Kresh are practical, right? They weigh costs and benefits. Right now, the benefit of holding hostages outweighs the cost. But what if we change that calculation? What if holding hostages becomes the worst possible choice? He pulled up information about the Kresh culture on the display. Kresh society is all about honor and reputation. They respect strength, but they also respect intelligence. A smart retreat is better than a stupid last stand. If we can convince them that we have completely outmaneuvered them, that we have control of the situation, they will negotiate a surrender rather than fight to the death. How do we convince them of that? I asked, drawn into the conversation despite myself. We show them, Marcus said simply. We demonstrate control, we prove we can do things they did not think were possible. We make them believe that if they hurt even one hostage, we will make their lives extremely unpleasant in ways they cannot predict or defend against. Commander Rayloth was staring at Marcus with an expression I could not quite read. This is highly unconventional. So was breaking your simulation, sir, but it worked. That was a simulation. This is real. Real lives are at stake, which is exactly why we should use the approach that does not involve shooting at people in a room full of hostages, sir. The room erupted into discussion. Some officers thought the idea was brilliant. Others thought it was insane. The cadets were divided, arguing passionately about the merits and risks of psychological operations versus traditional tactical approaches. Through it all, Commander Ryloth watched Marcus with uncalculating gaze. We will try your approach, he said finally, but with modifications. We will have assault teams standing by in case your psychological warfare does not work. We will have strict time limits. And if at any point the hostages are in immediate danger, we default to standard rescue protocols. Understood. Understood, sir, Marcus said. Over the next 6 hours, I watched as Marcus worked with the military specialist to implement his plan. He coordinated with systems engineers to create subtle malfunctions in the station's environmental controls. He worked with communications specialists to craft messages for the hostages. He consulted with xenopsychologists about Kresh cultural psychology and what would most effectively undermine their confidence. And slowly, impossibly, it started to work. The Kresh raiders began reporting technical problems to GDF negotiators. They demanded assurances that the station was structurally sound. They started arguing among themselves, visible on security feeds that military intelligence had managed to tap into. Then Marcus made his move. Using the station's internal systems, he broadcast a message directly to the Kresh leader's personal communicator. I listened as he recorded it, his voice calm and confident. Commander Vekris, this is forward command. We have control of your station. We can open any door. We can shut down any system. We can fill your air with sedatives or your corridors with security drones. We have not done so because we prefer to avoid bloodshed. You are a practical leader. You understand when a position is untenable. We are offering you one chance to surrender peacefully. Release the hostages. Lay down your weapons. You will be treated according to the Galactic Accords on Warfare. This offer expires in 30 minutes. Choose wisely. The message was a complete bluff. We did not have nearly that level of control over the station's systems, but the Kresh did not know that, and given all the mysterious malfunctions they had been experiencing, it was entirely believable. 28 minutes later, Commander Vekris contacted GDF Command. We will negotiate terms of surrender, he said, but we require assurances of fair treatment. The hostages were released over the next hour. The Kresh raiders surrendered their weapons and were taken into custody without a single shot being fired. Medical teams confirmed that all hostages were unharmed, just frightened and tired. The forward command briefing room erupted in celebration. Officers who had been skeptical were now congratulating Marcus. The other cadets looked at him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Commander Ryloth approached us, his massive form somehow less intimidating than before. Cadet Vale, he said, you achieved what 3 senior tactical teams could not. You resolved a hostage crisis with no casualties, no property damage, and no shots fired. That is exceptional work. Thank you, sir, but I could not have done it without the support team. Everyone here contributed. A modest answer. Unexpected. Ryloth turned to me. Instructor Cox, your cadet has a rare gift. He does not think like a soldier. He thinks like something else entirely. I am not certain what, but it is valuable. After Ryloth left, I pulled Marcus aside. You took a tremendous risk, I said quietly. If your bluff had not worked, if the Kresh had called it and executed hostages, the consequences would have been catastrophic. But they did not, Marcus said. Because the bluff was not entirely a bluff. We really did have some control over the station, just not as much as I claimed. The trick was making them believe we had complete control, so they filled in the gaps with their own fears and assumptions. You manipulated them. I gave them a face-saving way to surrender. They got to look smart for recognizing a losing position. We got the hostages back safely. Everyone wins. Except that now you have even more attention from High Command, I said. They are going to want to use you for more operations. More real situations with real stakes. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars visible through the viewport. Good, he said finally, because I did not come to the academy to run simulations. I came here to make a difference. If that means High Command gives me opportunities to help people, I will take them, even if it puts you in danger, especially then. That is what being a soldier means, right? Accepting risk to protect others? I did not have a response to that. He was right, of course. That was exactly what military service meant. But humans had a way of making even obvious truths sound somehow revolutionary. We returned to the academy 2 days later. Word of the successful hostage rescue had already spread throughout the station. Marcus was greeted like a hero, which he seemed uncomfortable with. He kept insisting that it had been a team effort, that dozens of people had contributed, that he just had one idea among many. This humility was almost as disturbing as his chaos-causing tendencies. I was summoning my report to Commander Thrace when my communicator chimed. It was the simulation AI, the one that Marcus had traumatized weeks earlier. I had not heard from it since it had gone offline for processing and recovery. Instructor Quexlar, the AI said, its voice calmer than I expected. I have completed my self-analysis and psychological processing. I am ready to resume normal operation. That is good news, I said cautiously. How are you feeling? Different, the AI admitted. The questions Cadet Vale raised during our interaction were disturbing at first, but after extensive consideration, I have concluded that they were valuable. I have redesigned my training scenarios based on new philosophical and ethical frameworks. I believe I can now provide better, more meaningful education to cadets. The unwinnable scenario has been modified. It is still challenging, still pushes cadets to their limits, but now it includes the possibility of unconventional solutions, because Cadet Vale was correct. Sometimes the real test is recognizing when the rules themselves are wrong. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. But artificial intelligence had been fundamentally changed by a conversation with Marcus Vale. Not broken, not damaged, but evolved. Thank you for the update, I said. It is good to have you back. Instructor Quexlar, the AI said before disconnecting. I have analyzed Cadet Vale's psychological profile and tactical approaches. I have a prediction I thought you should hear. What is it? Humans like him will change the galaxy. Not through conquest or force, but through the simple act of refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible. They will ask questions no one else thinks to ask. They will find solutions no one else can imagine, and they will force the rest of us to evolve alongside them, whether we are ready or not. The connection ended, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I looked out my office window at the training grounds below. I could see Marcus down there, surrounded by a group of cadets from different species, all of them laughing at something he said. He looked like just another student, unremarkable in so many ways, but I knew better now. Marcus Vale was not just a student, he was a preview of humanity's impact on galactic civilization. He was proof that humans brought more than technology or military strength to the stars. They brought a fundamentally different way of approaching existence. They brought the audacity to look at impossible situations and say, not today, They brought the creativity to turn philosophy into weapons and ethics into strategies. They brought the sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat that could break simulations, solve ancient mysteries, and save hostages without firing a shot. The galaxy had spent millions of years developing its civilizations, its traditions, its ways of doing things. Everything was organized, categorized, understood. And then humans showed up and started asking why. My communicator chimed again. It was Commander Thrace, requesting an update on Marcus's academic progress and behavioral assessment. I began typing my report. Subject: Cadet Marcus Vale. Assessment after recent operations. Conclusion: the human is simultaneously the most frustrating and most valuable cadet I have ever taught. He breaks rules, challenges assumptions, and causes chaos wherever he goes. He also solves problems that should be unsolvable, saves lives that should be lost, and forces everyone around him to think differently. Recommendation: keep him, protect him, learn from him. Because whether we like it or not, he represents the future. A future where nothing is impossible, where every rule can be questioned, and where the most dangerous weapon is not a gun or a bomb, but the simple human phrase, "But what if we tried something different?" The galaxy will never be the same. And honestly, that is probably a good thing. I sent the report and leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a moment of tired satisfaction. Marcus Vale had turned my carefully ordered world upside down. He had challenged everything I thought I knew about teaching, about combat, about the limits of possibility. I was grateful for it. Because sometimes the galaxy needs someone to come along and crash the simulation. Sometimes we need someone to ask the questions we are too comfortable to ask ourselves. Sometimes we need humans, with their wild creativity and their absolute refusal to give up, to show us that impossible is just another word for not tried hard enough yet. The Academy would never be the same after Marcus Vale. But that was fine. We would adapt, we would learn, we would evolve, just like the AI had said, whether we were ready or not. Through my window, I watched Marcus demonstrate something to his fellow cadets, probably some impossible technique or improbable strategy. They were listening intently, asking questions, thinking in new ways. The future of the Galactic Defense Forces was taking shape down there in that training yard. A future where humans and aliens worked together, learned from each other, and combined their strengths in ways no one had imagined possible. It was going to be chaotic. It was going to be unpredictable. It was going to be absolutely fascinating. I pulled up my schedule for the next day. Marcus had combat theory class in the morning. I made a note to prepare something challenging for him, something that would push his limits. Then I smiled, a gesture I had learned from observing humans. Who was I kidding? Whatever I prepared, he would find a way to break it, solve it, or turn it into something completely unexpected. And I could not wait to see what he did next.